I am Mariana Danilovich. I'm the founder of Infiom, which is a global consensus network of business development professionals. We host events in the clubhouse twice a week for an hour. One is today. It's Ask Us Anything About DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, metaverses, and our panel of experts will tell you a little bit more about each one of those opportunities in the blockchain space. We also have a virtual Infiom Salon tomorrow, Wednesdays at 12:30 p.m. And we usually showcase presentations by top tier CEOs in the space, investors, and heads of innovation in the blockchain space, and then follow that by a discussion in the clubhouse at 1:30 p.m. how to create unicorns with NFT, DeFi, and DAOs. And with that, I'd like to introduce Brian.
Hey, so my name is Brian Quant. I actually happen to be the husband to Jeanette DePatty, who you normally see here today, and who I'm pretending to talk for. My background: I am a software engineer in the media and entertainment industry. My expertise is mostly in media communications, database technologies, and I have been working in the blockchain space, helping some of our media companies today integrate the technology into their existing offerings.
Awesome. And so, anytime you have a question for us, please raise your hand and we'll have you join us on the stage and you could ask anything that you may want to know. We publish a newsletter every week. You can sign up for it on our website. I'll post the website link shortly. This week, the newsletter was all about what happened in 2021 in the space and what are some of the predictions for 2022. In 2021, there was, this these new segments of the market started developing at an extraordinary speed. So everyone thought of the market as a very uniform crypto market up till maybe 2020, 2021. And for a variety of reasons, in those last 2 years, the pandemic certainly driving adoption of digital applications, including, digital currencies and digital art, etc. But also because two segments developed very quickly on the Ethereum platform. One was the DeFi. There was a DeFi summer in 2020, and DeFi continued to grow in different directions in 2021. And then NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, which were launched, back in 2017 on Ethereum, they really captured everyone's attention in 2021. And so couple of different predictions in that and kind of summaries in our newsletter. One from PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is looking more at the enterprise level summary. And then we had one from Pantera Capital, which is looking more at where the markets would develop in 2022. And the markets are going to be strong based on both summaries in the NFTs are going to continue to grow. They're proliferating every area and every industry, and they're going to continue to do that in 2022. And certainly, DeFi is going to continue to grow in a variety of directions. And of course, tokenization, some people will argue at this point that tokenization is going to be as prevalent inside every organization as a stock share or ownership in an LLC was up till now. So these are the new trends that we will be dealing with in 2022. Brian, do you have any thoughts from the technology perspective how this is going to shape up?
Oh, I always have thoughts, and I'm always confused as all heck, and I'm wanting to ask millions of questions about, okay, how do we do all this? Some of the stuff in reading the newsletter that I kind of liked, going through the what does it mean to start a DAO? How do we actually go about that? Caught my attention, and I remember from past discussions, some of the things I keep wondering about is the governance and how do we go about ensuring people have proper rights to vote and proper classes of voting and all that kind of stuff starts going through my mind. So these are all questions. Oh, I'd love to engage in conversation on with others if they see that as well.
All right, so let's talk about DAOs for a moment. I was talking to some very senior executives that I've known from years of being in media, entertainment, digital media. They worked with me in a variety of other areas. On the traditional side of the business, and they were asking me, why would what DAOs really do and how are they related to the technology. So the DAOs are not really about technology, in some ways at all. They're really just an organizational structure. And as soon as you decide to tokenize an economy, that's when you start to think about, should I have a DAO or not have a DAO? So I could tokenize an economy and conceivably just create a C corp or an LLC, which are other organizational structures here in the US and globally. There are other options, etc. But the reason why people create a DAO is that they're really building a community in for their company, whether they're dropping NFTs or doing something else that's interesting in the space. They're creating a community. And once you have a community, you want to give that community some semblance of, they're either going to participate in the governance of this company or this organization in the way that it grows. They may be just a membership, community. And so you have to kind of set a standard as to what that community is doing, and based on that, you then create, a DAO as an organization or not. So it's really kind of like many steps of iteration of whether you should have a DAO or not have a DAO as your organizational structure. It
Yeah, and
is not as much as to like, oh, this is something, this is something that we have to decide as we build the original offering.
yeah, and this is something that so when I started getting involved in these technologies, blockchains, DeFi, NFTs, etc. This was something that was so curious to me is having been an entrepreneur now for, oh God, I don't even want to admit how many years that I've been doing this. This is just another way of organizing your effort or your idea to allow others to participate in, for lack of a better word, to create. A DAO is just another form in my mind of just having a stock type offering, but it's not a stock offering. It's however you decide to organize underneath the DAO. And this is the thing that gets interesting, and I think this is always, as an entrepreneur, one of the hardest challenges that I've always faced when building the different type of companies I've been involved in is how do you ensure the best interest of the organization to ensure that that keeps going forward, as well as the best interest of the individuals that are participating, and to ensure that all the individuals continue to participate in a positive way, and that the organization also continues to grow in a positive way. And that's what I find really fun and interesting about looking into DAOs and how we could potentially organize things a little differently than what we used to do or what we have done in C corps or LLCs or sole proprietors or whatever. So I find, or partnerships, I find that very interesting.
Yeah, so many years ago, I launched the very first corporate accelerator incubator with a large company with KPMG, and at the beginning of the internet adoption. And Bill Gross launched Ideal Lab at about the same time. And he had a really interesting business model for Ideal Lab, which is he had these wonderful ideas of everything that should be digitized, and go to the internet in essence. And I had this long discussion with him back then where he said to me, companies should really remain very small, and everything in excess of 100-person company starts to become very cumbersome and layered, and has different structures that are really not non-beneficial and non-manageable. That was his point of view, and of course we know that that's not how companies developed in our world, etc. However, when you look at a DAO, that somehow some of these DAOs that have been successful are somewhat following that model by Bill Gross, way back when he thought of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. As soon as you said that, keep them very small. I'm reminded of what is it? One of my favorite books, Moon is a Harsh Mistress, Heinlein and the organization of how they put together their. I won't go into the book. You're gonna get me to ramble on that. But it is. It's like how do you put things together? How do you get decision making to be done efficiently? And the smaller the group was always better. And then today, and a lot of our corporate infrastructure today, we've kind of gotten to the point where we have huge groups that are necessary to make decision, and we're kind of bogged down as technology continues to move faster than what our decision making process is. So one of the things I'm curious about in a DAO, can you talk a little bit about how might you split a DAO out and represent, going back to this concept of what I'm asking, how do you represent the best practices of whatever the goals are for the DAO to go forward, but still have individual rights within the DAO, so to maintain proper voting power within the DAO? Has anybody talked about that before?
Yes, and there are many companies that are, and many of the DAOs that are grappling with this as we speak, because there are obviously things that are working as it's a new format and things that are not working. Um, you look at the congestion on the Ethereum platform, that's clearly not working at the moment. Whatever the consensus mechanism is that's gotten us to that point, it has not solved that problem. And you can say, well, that's a technology problem and not really a governing problem, and vice versa, right? But the bottom line is there is a operational slash financial issue that needs to be solved. So I step back from all of this and think of it this way. If you are starting a company today, why would you select a DAO, and what would it do for you, right? And then have to step back again and say to yourself, well, okay, before I go into my organizational slash legal structure, what am I really trying to accomplish with this business? And primarily, the biggest change that's happening in our world is, even though it's powered by technology 100%, it is about engagement at the consumer level. You're either going to get that engagement or you're not going to get that engagement. So you structure your DAO to get the engagement, right? So for each venture, it's going to be a different engagement that you're looking for. Example, we're working on a company that gives you rewards to watch television, film programming, invite your friends to watch with you, create events and parties surrounding that watching. In that DAO, you want those people in that economy to be engaged through rewards. So as you create your organization, that organization, not every person watching programming would want to decide how the network is being built, right? So you're not going to have that kind of a DAO like some of the layer one platforms or layer two platforms have. Then they're also not going to be, this is not going to be a DeFi solution. So you're not going to want to have equity ownership at every level and ability to transfer money seamlessly, etc. This is about rewarding people for participating in the entertainment economy. So is it a membership DAO? Is it more like an ambassador type DAO? That's where you make a decision. So it's some of the things immediately drop off as options because you're building this incentivized, rewards driven community. And other things become options because you're trying to strengthen that relationship.
So I wanted to ask everybody if you have any questions, of course, just feel free to raise your hand. I will see if I can figure out the Clubhouse platform and add you into the to be able to speak here. We're always willing to host any question here. Also, since it is CES this week, I can't tell you too much what's going on yet. We had our first meeting so I'm here at CES with my wife, who's with a company called StoryTech. StoryTech is one of the companies that's responsible for a lot of the media that's taking place with the CTA. and they had their whatever you want to call it. Some of the original press meetings were yesterday, and some of the discussion that took place. I was able to be a fly on the wall listening to this. Hot topic, of course, Samsung with adding NFT to their platforms. I think they announced actually a couple days ago. Haven't had time to get over to the hall to take a look at it, but when I do, I'd love to let everybody know what I think about it. Some of the One of the things I just wanted to let you all know, we will have an informal meetup of Infiom. Are we still good with that, Mariana?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and it'll be tomorrow at the Vidara Hotel, 6:30, and I'm blanking on the hotel or with the bar. It's the bar in the lobby, and I get you the name of the bar. It's literally the only bar in the lobby down there. And ideally, I'll have a beanie hat so you can find us if you happen to be at CES.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit, just a little bit about the NFTs and what is Samsung trying to do with them? Kind of, you haven't seen them firsthand, but what are the announcements?
I only know a little bit of the hearsay. I know a little bit of the stuff I've read. So it looks like what they're doing is putting together a marketplace. So it looks like, again, I don't know the specifics of what wallet. I would assume if I guessed, I would assume they're integrating the ability to attach a wallet to the television itself as an application, so that you can start to. And the bottom line, all the messaging is out there to create a marketplace for effectively trading NFTs. But how they've actually implemented it, and as an engineer, okay, I'll put my foot in my mouth as I always do as an engineer. I've always, as an engineer, it's someone developing applications from everything from iOS to Android to other type of platforms, cloud-based, etc. I've always found Samsung's own operating system kind of like, are we going to continue that existing operating system, or will we move into the world like Sony has done, implementing Android on their platforms to make it a little bit easier for us developers to become a developer for their platforms, or will they continue to have a walled garden type product development? That's something I'm always curious about if I hook up with some of the development teams when I'm here to learn more.
Yeah, because one of the biggest issues, having been an owner of a smart TV for many, many years now, one of the biggest issues is that, the interface between, on the smart TV that they would want you to use being inside, one of their more expensive devices, like a, large, uh, a television set in the home, is not something that is easily usable, and it's not something that people end up using as a default way to access all the other apps and all the other programs. So
Yeah, it's a little bit. Samsung took the original route. They were great that they developed an operating system that had the ability to add apps early on in the game when televisions didn't do that. Smart TVs didn't exist. However, you could arguably say that they're in a little bit of a corner uh, on app development because, again, they have a walled garden mentality to app development, in which you have to be a preferred vendor in order to get apps onto the platform. However, then again, you can argue that exact same mentality applies to Apple, that they effectively have a little bit more of a walled garden as well, compared to a little bit more of an open environment for development being on the Android platform. Um, so what's right, what's wrong, who knows? As my own personal opinion, I do prefer a little bit easier to do development, especially as we try to deploy new technologies such as NFTs. But then again, Samsung's the first one to implement NFT type technology in their platform. So, thumbs up on that.
it's really fascinating about CES. I'm moderating a panel tomorrow on how big banks and big tech are meeting, and most of my panelists come from larger financial institutions and banks, and they still view DeFi, stable coins, crypto, and all of these things we talk about every week, they still view it as a startup space. And that is comes a bit of as a shock to me, knowing how many unicorns we've developed already, and how much value has been locked in DeFi contracts, to the tune of over 110 billion, or uh, some people think it's higher than that even. And going up from 27 billion at the beginning of last year to 110, I mean, that's a huge growth.
And
So
yeah, you
just to
priced
have this,
the
yeah.
newsletter. The newsletter you were or that was one of the interesting points that we're making in that newsletter was the exact thing you were just saying. And it's like some have adopted and some have not.
But even the companies that are adopting it, in the press, the executives from these companies are basically saying, "Oh, it's just the start, bunch of startup companies, and the space is really nascent, and we don't really see how that's going to affect banking in 2022." Am I drinking the Kool-Aid, or is kind of CES, a bit reshuffling the chairs on the
So
deck of a variety of Titanics?
so half the table last night at dinner was on the side of yes, it's happening. We all have to be on board, and the other half was saying exactly being the naysayers. And as an engineer, I've been through this many times on development or introduction of new technology into the industry. I look at it as there's a lot of drinking the Kool-Aid, obviously. We all drink the Kool-Aid when we introduce new technologies, in my opinion. But the thing that I find most interesting is, as an app developer, what are the possibilities that could be done here? What is the social change that could take place as a result of introducing this type of technology into countries that are unbanked? What will that do? Or what is the capability of the technology to be deployed into the media entertainment industry? Even like I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, working with how could we develop new security models that are not controlled by one entity, that give one vendor an ability to have price locking or price control, and can we use blockchain type technologies to create what we call a trustless environment where nobody has actually control of where these security keys type go for everything from controlling access to content to controlling access to machines that are actually deployed to theaters worldwide. So I just see so many possibilities. Everything from on one side, which is kind of an oxymoron, on one side adding more control that is trustless to those that have a heck of a lot of control already. But then on the other side, I see the ability for individuals out there to get more control of their governments. Again, in the concepts unbanked people living in countries that have not had much of a voice within their government, maybe having more voice. So it's just new technology opening the doors to all sorts of possibilities. I love it.
And it seems to me it's still nascent. If I look at just the NFT space alone, what it has done in 2021, just with mostly art projects, some of the a few key music album drops, and some, interesting pre-sales of television programming. It really hasn't even scratched the surface of the way that the music, film, television, games, business models, and of course, play to earn gaming, an obvious, a big thing that's happened last year. Um, Even though it followed the original games business models, from the last decade, etc. There's so many opportunities to recreate the relationship with the viewer, with the consumer that's consuming the music product, the game, the film, television, etc., entertainment product, in so many ways, using tokens and using NFTs, that the business models have to fundamentally shift in entertainment. I don't think it's possible to keep them the way they are today.
No, I completely concur. And I found the name of the bar. So Videra. So we'll have a meetup Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. and after at the Vice Versa at the Vidara Hotel here in Las Vegas. And you're more than welcome to come by and say hello. It'll be completely informal, and to help you find whoever's there, hopefully we'll have a propeller head beanie hat someone will be wearing, or at least on the table. So again, anyone, if you have questions, feel free. We'd love to entertain some questions or some comments of what you think might be happening in the industry. Um, is anyone on the list? I forget. I know a lot of times we have other speakers join us. Mariana, do you see anybody here on the list already from
No,
our
I
past
don't.
gang? Okay.
So let's talk about the predictions for DeFi security. This is something that maybe Brian, you can address. It seems that there are many rug pulls happening on the DeFi on the token launch side. In 2021, and there are many issues with DeFi projects being hacked over the last year, and it seems that it's somewhat easy to launch a DeFi project and compete with banks, without regulatory approvals, in essence, using these distributed technologies. What kind of security audits are you seeing that would be happening in 2022 to, get DeFi to the next level?
So I really don't have a lot of knowledge in that space. I have, again, the more questions as to what is happening there. I think regulatory continues to be, of course, of quite a bit of interest. I think one of the groups that I participate is a group called MPEG 21 Smart Contracts, and I think intercompatibility is a major concern. For example, if I have an NFT, the number one thing is I create an NFT in the Ethereum platform and I'd like to move it over to Algorand, or I'd like to move it over to Tezos, or I'd like to move it anywhere that I'd like, and I'd like to be this as friction free as possible. Technologically, I couldn't even answer at this instant in time how that is actually done. So I think we have a little bit of a problem. First thing is, it's great Ethereum is out there. Ethereum has built up what we have, and all of our development that we do out there today to do deployment, either from a test perspective or an actual live, continues to be into Ethereum, because the universe is so the what you call it, the universe and the technology and the APIs and the existence of prior software and all that kind of stuff is so extensive in the Ethereum space that we do that. However, we run the problem of most of us that are trying to deploy bigger plans. We'd like to make sure that this can deploy across multiple chains. And at present, we do not have standards in place that are at least developed through the normal bodies of the standards development world that would mandate the ability to move between these areas. Other areas of concern are awareness, and one of the biggest problems that I can't remember the number, um, the amount of coin lost as a result of people forgetting how to actually access their wallets. So, from a development perspective, there's a lot of effort today to try to make that process easier. So, to come up with ways for people to maintain their ability to access a wallet, or to recover a wallet at a later time. So there's a lot of chatter in the dev groups as to how to make onboarding an individual into that world a little bit easier, and more importantly, how to handle that number one problem of forgetting your freaking password and how to actually get back in. So I see those as some of the hurdles that need to be done. From a governmental perspective, or governance perspective, questions that go through my mind, again, legally, back to DAOs. How do we represent? What are our reporting requirements? For example, if we establish a DAO that's backed with an LLC, and is there a conflict of interest in this concept of wanting to be anonymous in a DAO versus needing to be reported to the IRS? All those kind of things start to be very curious to me. I think we lost Mariana. So since I'm new to this and filling in for folks, you guys are gonna have to raise your hands. Either that, I'm gonna start inviting people at random. Dead silence. We can't have dead silence. So again, we're here at CES, and this is actually day one will be tomorrow. Mariana will actually be speaking tomorrow at a panel that will be talking about DeFi and NFTs and DAOs. And I'm going to pick on somebody here in a second. Oh, there's Mariana's
I'm
back.
back. Sorry, I'm in a bad cell zone.
No, no, we have dead silence here. Since I'm whatchamacallit, subbing for Jeanette. It's like I don't know what to talk about. Oh no.
No worries. Here's Paul has a question. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Paul here. So, really excited about the NFT space and using blockchain as a shared secured ledger where everyone knows what's on the ledger and it's validated. My concern is how do we balance that with privacy? I know that with other apps, there's ways to turn things on and off from public visibility, but with a blockchain, everything's visible all the time. Uh, how do you see the technology evolving to include things like a privacy policy?
Yeah, so everything is visible, and yet, everything is anonymous at the
Yeah,
same
I know.
time.
That's what I was gonna say. Everything is on there, but you don't. It can be anonymized to pointing to a bucket that has information only accessible in some other way, or to a different type of NFT holder or token holder.
Yeah, so if you think about the NFT drops, something that's kind of challenging for us, inviting people to speak at our events and or present about their projects, it's very hard to even figure out who owns these projects and who are
Right.
the people who can talk about the projects, because even though it's visible on the ether scan as to what transactions took place, you don't really know who owns that particular wallet, or you don't really know who did that particular transaction and why, and you don't really know who's managing that particular DAO, for example. So I would say that it's kind of, you have the worst or the best of both worlds,
I
depending on how you look at it.
I completely agree with that. And actually, I can give you a couple of examples. So, since I work in the media and entertainment, so Hollywood industry, the classic comment is, are we going to store our media assets actually on block? And even today, in the issuance of JPEGs, we're actually not storing our media assets on block. All we're doing is recording Internet Planetary File System references to those assets on block. And there's a lot of reasons we don't do that. Number one reason is the physical amount of cost and space that it would take to physically put those things on block are just exorbitant. So we don't do that. But there isn't any reason that you can't design a system that would record the transactions, the necessary side of the transactions physically on block, so you have a fully crypto guaranteed thing that says this ID actually had this transaction at this time, but include a reference that is proprietary. And for example, that reference might be an identifier that is pointing to a database reference in a VOD library, video on demand library, that is representing the movie Titanic. That those who are properly registered owners or owners of NFT or token or something like that could actually then watch on demand on their phone. So the content is actually not being stored there, but the reference to the content is stored, and the security on the content itself could be traditional DRM or one of the new methods that are out there that are being proposed for securing content in a blockchain type universe coupled with DRM. So I think you can do both. You can do both. You can put it all in there if you want and make it all publicly, or you can create a hybrid model of all this stuff distributed proprietarily and transactions public.
Hi, Terry. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Excellent. Happy New Year. You want to just
Happy New
introduce
Year.
yourself really briefly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Terry. I do crypto and NFT education, coaching, and strategy here on Clubhouse and on Twitter Spaces. Um, that's me.
Yeah, and if you see Jeanette speaking in a male voice, it's
It's
actually
actually
Brian Kwan,
Brian.
her husband.
Always creeps me out. I never know. Is it a person? Are you sharing a video?
I I am anonymous. I am anonymizing Jeanette's voice.
Yeah, he's anonymizing her voice on the ledger.
Or just
Colin,
learning more about Jeanette. That's all.
yeah. Colin, how are you today?
I am doing fabulous. Just listening to everything you guys got going on. Unfortunately, locked in my room with COVID at the moment, but gives me opportunity to listen to all the fun things that people are talking about right now.
Do you have a question?
Well, I did early a little while ago. I was just kind of pondering on some of the discussion you were having around DAOs and some of the structures around that, and I thought,
Well,
uh,
tell us what you think about how would you balance a DAO for individual rights and community rights? How can we my number one goal, being the social anarchist engineer that I am, my number one goal would be how do we prevent those who have the most ETH from not controlling the organization,
sure.
but still
So,
offering benefit to those out there who actually contribute either from
so I
writing
think there
code
are
or being a
there's
good
readily
voice.
available models for that sort of thing already, right? Where you have different voting classes of shares in a company. You can structure the same thing in a DAO. A DAO itself is just a voting or a voting mechanism, and you can value specific tokens in a DAO with particular voting rights. You can block you can block groups of tokens to have a singular voting share, so it doesn't really matter how much weight you're voting with. It just everyone gets, if you own a token, you get a vote. Doesn't matter if you have 1,000 tokens or one token. You can structure those things contractually within the organization. I think the underlying what's so great about the underlying ethos of the DAO is that everybody who's in the community gets the right to vote around those structures, and you can even vote to change those structures with independently with the members of that DAO. So those things can shift and change over time. You just have to be able to have the voting power to do it. Just like when an EIP is presented in the ether space, and everybody goes and votes on whether or not to accept it or force a hard fork, or when miners on the Bitcoin network, shift everything over to a forked version and use that as their voting structure. I think it's up to the organization internally and the members of that organization and the community of that organization to make that determination and to code those terms in. That's what's so beautiful about it, right? Is that everybody who's a part of it and who's trying to drive it makes those decisions and votes together to actually create what they want to create.
Yeah, and that was honestly that was one of the most enlightening things that I ever discovered being an entrepreneur when I participated in an organization that had a lot of large companies present, but there were also the entrepreneurial individuals that were participating and to when it came time to vote, my vote mattered as much as Intel's or Sony's vote mattered. A very empowering moment for me and a very great educational experience for me, literally 30 years ago.
Yeah, and I think you'll see a lot of interesting structures come up where you'll start seeing uh, venture capital models or incubator models start to take on the structure of a DAO, similar in a consensus model, right? Where people will present startup ideas, members of the DAO will vote on whether to fund those ideas and shift voting power from the tokens to those particular ideas and sort of incubate them. And you'll start to see a lot of sort of creative explosion occurring in those spaces, depending on whether or not regulation kind of stomps it out or slows it down.
You know, I would love to hear a little bit more about the venture capital interface with the DAOs. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so I think it's very early, nascent stages. That this is a conversation I was actually having with some VC friends of mine not too long ago. But the concept and the ability is there, right? You can structure the same model where you have an organization that's going to do its 20% carry, and you're going to effectively let everyone fund the DAO with their ether or whatever they happen to want to fund it with. Then you basically have that pool of kind of what you would think of as like your LP fund, and you can sort of mint new tokens for additional LP funds. But members of those LP funds in the DAO can effectively sit there and say, okay, well, you know, the organization itself could invite entrepreneurs or members of the community or other DAO token holders to come in and actually produce an idea and say, hey, we've got this idea that we're going to do with drones and reseeding the earth with new trees, right? And you could have members of the DAO who might be smart money. They might be in that industry. They might be ecologists or some other, they might have green funds that they're trying to allocate, right? They could vote their tokens towards that particular uh, structure and effectively fund it to a particular point. Those member organizations could theoretically put all their books, put all their voting categories on the chain so that it's a fully transparent operation to the parent DAO, and grow those organizations up. And you know I think that's a model that you're going to see going forward, and how where you're going to see sort of venture capital start to move towards in the future, because it gives full transparency to all the members of the LP. It gives full, you can uh, very closely monitor the investments. You can sort of prevent fraud from things like, you minimize the potential for fraud from things like Theranos, or some of these larger organizations that basically collect a lot of capital and then don't do anything with it. Um, because you can catch those sorts of things earlier. Or if somebody's doing something screwy with the books like WeWork did, right? You can see things happening a little bit faster and quicker. I think that's the direction that these things are going to start moving in. You're going to see people, structuring in their 20% carry into the actual voting mechanism. You'll see these launches, and if one of the sort of funded startups goes public, then everything is already built into the contract from the parent DAO, and so all those transactions occur seamlessly and will most likely occur automatically. And you don't have to go. You'll start cutting out a lot of the cost of the middlemen, with like the larger banking organizations having to underwrite the cost of going public, because everything's already tokenized. You already have your synthetics that'll probably be monitoring it. There's a lot of places this could go, right?
So on the regulatory side, what are you thinking? So
Well,
one of the
that's
questions that,
that's that's
yeah,
the big
go.
question, right? Is nobody really knows what direction that's going to go. I mean, I work in the fintech space nowadays, and I obviously don't speak for the organization that I work for, but I don't think anybody really knows where it's going to go regulatory wise. They're trying to figure all that out. Um, but again, there's the argument of, should there be a separate crypto regulatory environment, and the SEC doesn't seem to think so, or at least they're publicly stating that. Um, I have absolutely no idea which way the wind will blow on that one. I
Yeah, and
think
this is again the two words that the discussion that went, that was at the dinner table last night here at CES, for those talking NFT and those talking DAOs and blockchain, the term qualified investor, and that's obviously it's a good question. um,
Yeah, and I
and
think a
drives
lot
growth.
of that's going to change too. The sort of retail explosion that's occurred over the last couple of years with that you've seen with like Robinhood and retail sort of stock investors in the crypto markets in general are really sort of showing that the general public does not want to be protected from the accredited investor because it just simply hinders people from being able to make their own decisions.
And as
And
an
I think we're going to
entrepreneur, it's
see a lot
been
lower limits on those types of things coming around the corner.
yeah, and as an entrepreneur, that's been the number one problem about when you start to initial or when you try to raise initial rounds of money. Um, if you're going to go through the old traditional school concepts of PPOs and stuff like that, um, does anyone that's trying to bring a new idea to market have actual connection to those that are in that type of position to help fund it? And most would say no. So are we stifling development?
Yeah, and the quote unquote accredited investor definition covers less than 3% of the US population. If you look at what's happened with crowdfunding, and certainly with crowdfunding through crypto mechanisms, that is, showing investors that even though they may not be quote unquote accredited according to the US and other jurisdiction standards, they're doing a lot better in these emerging markets, being able to participate at a crowd level. And so it's really just I would say at this point, um, preventing people from participating in different markets. So I agree, the definition will have to change.
So we have a couple other people here on the stage: Terry, Paul, and Edward. If I read that right,
I think Ed
uh,
came to ask a question, right? Ed,
please.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
Edward. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so my question is I'm a DJ and I'm very interested in music cryptos. Um it's essentially like what you were talking about, kind of like becoming an investor in music. I'm super interested in disrupting everything that has to do with the current business music business model. And I'm just wondering if any of you have any knowledge in this area of how some good projects to get involved with and sort of how to get started. Because like that area of becoming, like, yeah, the potential of becoming an investor or just supporting this is really exciting to me.
So there's lots of fun stuff happening in that space. Some other folks can probably talk to that. I used to be in the music tech space. I'm also a DJ. That's how I got into the music tech space, and had to deal with a lot with licensing. I had a startup called Deja Set, which originally then converted to Set FM. I think it's now owned by a company called Venue, which is all sort of live music recording and distribution. And there's all kinds of fun licensing stuff that goes along with that. Um, I'm betting Mariana and well, I'm going to say Jeanette because that's all I can only see at the
It's
moment.
Brian.
Um, Brian, it
Well,
sounded
we're
like
we're
you
one brain.
plays in that space as well quite a bit.
We're married, so we're technically one brain. So you can call me Jeanette. That's fine.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on the music space. Clearly, something that has needed to be restructured for a couple of decades. It had, first set of restructuring happening with the Napster, Kazaa, and all the digitally distributed projects in music ended up in, on the streaming platforms. The fundamental models of how consumers and fans enjoy and pay for music have been disrupted, not always to help the creators of music. And so, this new disruption hopefully will change that business model finally, so that the creators have direct connection to their audiences, and the audiences can directly reward creators for their creations. That's the idea behind it, just general idea.
Yeah, and you'll see.
And Edward, I'm curious. Are you trying to learn on the technology side or more on the business side? I'd love to hear more of that.
Yeah, more interested on the business side. I'm an entrepreneur, have my own business that's It's not really technology. It's more, like we're basically, it's called Tribe Called Funk. We basically, it's a mobile DJ unit with a portable dance floor. We just launched this last July, and I've been thinking about different ways to merge my love for business and music with crypto. So that's one of the things. But yeah, like, oh, I mean, just what like Mariana said, like I'm just super interested in supporting like artists. I think the quality of like a lot of the music that is getting into the mainstream is just like not really on par in compared to decades in the past. And I think a lot of it is because yeah, like we're not paying good artists, like what people, the labels and these radio stations that are all owned by like Clearwater or whatever, they're deciding what gets into people's ears. And I would love to be involved in sort of like helping democratize how who gets to decide what is good music, and kind of makes yeah, let our dollars speak and say, okay, yeah, these are the people that you need to be listening to.
So
uh, yeah.
So I think there's all sorts of stuff you can go in to learn on this kind of stuff and start thinking about. From a big business perspective, again, one of the projects I was involved in, uh, the problem that they were trying to resolve is kind of a small, if you're getting into the business for the first time and trying to deal with the monopolies that might exist out there or whatever, that we can democratize, use the technology to democratize what's currently there. The big companies actually have kind of a similar problem in that, and I'll give you the specific example of big companies will oftentimes outsource certain types of their needs. And again, I'm trying not to be too specific here, but that need would go to vendors out there that, as both the vendor grows and as the giant corporation grows even bigger, the vendor becomes more and more powerful. And you end up where you have one vendor providing a large corporation with services that they're now both locked together. And the cool thing about blockchain technologies is we can decentralize this. We can turn this into a trustless type relationship where vendors can swap at will, and corporate buyers can swap at will. So what this translates to, down back in the entrepreneurial type world, is we can use that same technology to try to grow what's more important, which is our community, and then use the technology to to continue to increase the size of that community, to make sure it's anonymized, and at a later time, maybe that whole community then can be used as an instrument for more funding. I'm starting to ramble here, so I'll shut up.
Well, on the business side, clearly, since you have an experience that involves viewers and participants, I mean, it's a participatory experience that you're bringing a dancing stage and basically a DJ to go situation. I think you definitely have an opportunity to create a community surrounding this, right? So I'm not sure if you're driving, the stage from different venues or how does that all work out, but you can basically drop NFTs that are providing access to participating in your experience. And you should really think through, how do I plan my business model for this year so that that experience is not always the same. So there are layers of experiences. I think Adrian talks about this quite a bit in the clubhouse here, different membership structures for NFT drops that lead to different business models subsequent to the drop. And so what would you like to do with your community? What could you offer to them that's repeatable, and then what could you offer to them that's not repeatable, that would be extraordinary, maybe partnering with some other acts, et cetera, that they could get access to if they sort of get that initial NFT drop and then maybe some subsequent drops after that. So those are all the things that can be done today.
Yeah, that's I mean, I would love to learn more about what you just said, Mariana. And yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of like projects that focus on how can crypto interact with like small businesses, you know, like that. Yeah, if you know people that are kind of talking more about that, I think you mentioned somebody named Agent or something like that. Yeah, I would love to connect with those people.
Yeah, and also I think you have to think of your business. You're really in the performing arts business. I was on the board of directors of something called Vortex Immersion for several years, and these guys had vortex domes. They looked like a 360-degree domes, and inside these vortex domes they were selling different experiences. It could be a screening, a music performance, a certain type of a film that's conducive to that 360 kind of projection. And they were taking these domes to different locations, so they were literally almost creating like a franchise opportunity with the domes and with the theatrical performance in the dome. I see that what you're doing is maybe somewhat of a smaller scale, but it's similar to that. You're creating an immersive experience, and you want to, you can maybe just duplicate it yourself, or you can sort of franchise this experience and have it happening in different locations. Why I think this is kind of, an opportune time to do this is that we don't have these large gatherings anymore because of COVID. Things have gone, open and closed so many times. People don't even go to the movie theaters feeling safe anymore, which is really sad, but it's happened. But with these smaller gatherings, localized gatherings where you have X many people in the gathering, you may actually create a business model that makes sense, for the lifestyle that we have today. So that's just one idea. And you can partner up with like-minded people like yourselves, maybe aggregate DJs around the globe that are going to be doing similar experience to yours. We used to call that a format in television. You can create your own experiential NFT format performances.
Wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much.
And Adrian Ashley is the person who's done a lot of marketing with NFTs for a variety of types of different sort of music, film, etc. performances. She's a really good marketing person to talk to, and she's usually here in this clubhouse or tomorrow at 1:30.
Cool, I'll reach out.
And feel free to reach out to us as well anytime. Um, we are at the end of our session today. I want to thank Brian for leading the session today and helping us from the um, technology perspective on things.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me. And look forward to doing it again.
And thank you for all your input, Colin. Those were some really interesting um, observations on how to structure the businesses and how to interact with different sources of funding. So thank you for that. Terry, always great to see you. Edward, thank you for your questions. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you're at CES, come to Vidara, which is one of the newer casinos that we're going to be at a bar downstairs. What is the bar's name, Brian?
So Vidara Hotel, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Vice versa is the name of the bar.
We'll see you all there, and thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.